Well, it looks like it's time for a little more week-old movie news, so let's get started. Alright, hello and welcome to this episode of Worth Watching Wednesdays. Now, today the little bit of movie news I'm going to be talking about is almost exactly a week old because it came out the day after I recorded the last week's episode of Worth Watching Wednesdays, and that is that the Oscar nominations for 2013 have been announced. And yes, I said 2013 because they're the nominations of the movies that came out in 2013, even though the awards are taking place in this year, 2014. Don't worry, I didn't forget what year it is. So anyways, the Oscar nominations came out, and I'm not going to run through all of them because that would take forever and it would be pretty boring, but what I'm going to do is highlight essentially my thoughts on a few specific instances. First off, Best Supporting Actor. Barkhad Abdi got nominated. If he hadn't, I would have been extremely upset, but he did, so I'm happy about that. He's probably not going to win, even though I think he should, just because of the astoundingness of his performance and the fact that it's the first movie he's ever been in. I wish the Oscars had like a Best Breakout Actor kind of thing, because he would be a shoo-in to win that, and I really want to see him in more stuff, so if he could get an Oscar under his belt, that'd be kind of amazing and help that process along. And Jennifer Lawrence was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for American Hustle, and I was hoping that she would get nominated as well because her performance absolutely stole the show in every scene that she was in that movie. On to Best Actor. Now, I have a couple gripes here. I mean, I can hardly even call them gripes because I feel like most of the people who got nominated should have been nominated, but there are a couple people who I would have liked to see get nominations who didn't. Number one would be Tom Hanks for Captain Phillips. I cannot believe they did not nominate him for his performance in that. It was an amazing performance, absolutely riveting for the entire movie. He just gave himself to that role so much and just played the role astoundingly. But of course, Matthew McConaughey is going to get nominated over him because he starved himself for his movie role. And if we've learned anything in the past, it's that body modifications get you Oscar nominations. I should make a bumper sticker out of that. The other actor who I really would have liked to have seen be nominated is Hugh Jackman for Prisoners. As you know, I wasn't a huge fan of the movie Prisoners, but Hugh Jackman's performance throughout that whole movie was just absolutely amazing. He gave himself to the role completely. He was both terrifying to watch and you felt for him at the same time, but you also disagreed with what he was doing, so you could like and dislike his character at the same time. He brought a lot of complexity to the role, and just, you could, in his eyes, you could see just the fury that his character had, and he brought so much to the role. And on to the final category, I'm going to be talking about Best Picture, and I essentially agree. I think they did a good job this year nominating the Best Picture candidates. I mean, you have 12 Years a Slave, Captain Phillips, Gravity, and a whole bunch of other movies. Those were really the main three that I was really hoping were going to make it in there, and I was scared Captain Phillips was just barely not going to make it, but it's in there, so I'm really happy about that. I don't think it's going to win, but I think it definitely deserved to at least be nominated. Overall, the only movie that I felt got kind of across the board snubbed at the Oscars was Lone Survivor. I think it definitely deserved more attention, but yeah, it should have been nominated for a little more than it was, in my opinion. I know it was towards the tail end of the season, so it maybe got overlooked a little more, because there was a lot that came out this year, a lot of really, really good movies. So, just it didn't quite make it, but, overall, I think it was a pretty good year for the Oscars. And on to the movie review / recommendation of the week. Now, this is a movie that I just watched for like the 5th time earlier this week, and that is The Mummy. Yes, you heard me right. The 1999 Brendan Fraser vehicle, The Mummy. Now, we just talked about all the Oscar nominations, so this is a movie that would never in its life win an Oscar for anything, but is still most definitely worth watching, and here is why. So the plot of The Mummy takes place in the early 1900s. I think it's like 1923 is when the majority of the movie takes place. And the movie centers around this very mismatched group of people journeying into the desert to look for a specific ancient book in the hidden city of the dead in ancient Egypt. But what they find along the way is a cursed mummy that they accidentally bring back to life and starts terrorizing people in the formula of like the old 1930s mummy movies. And that's really where this movie shines, in my opinion. I think this is one of the last great classic adventure movies along the lines of, say, Indiana Jones, or earlier, Universal horror pictures along those lines. But this thing twists in some comedy in there. It's somewhat self-aware in that it knows what it's doing, and it knows that it's cheesy, knows it's ridiculous, and is doing that intentionally, but not in an over-the-top way like movies we've seen do it since. This blends it perfectly with seriousness and comedy, and is just an incredibly fun, high-action, high-adventure, swashbuckling ride all the way through. And this movie has the honor of possibly being the only worth-watching Brendan Fraser movie that I've ever seen. He plays the main character. He's an ex-soldier who's now getting roped into the scheme to go look for this golden book in the desert. And he's like Indiana Jones in the fact that he gets himself out of all these ridiculous situations, only Indiana Jones does it via skill. Brendan Fraser's character manages to get out of these situations just by sheer dumb luck. He's not smart. He's not good at what he does. He's just really lucky and gets a lot of really lucky breaks. Which makes his character really fun to watch because you get someone who appears really confident, really competent, but is really sort of an everyman in the fact that he gets by all of these situations just by pure luck, and he should have died at least 16 times through the course of this movie if left to his own devices, and that's what makes him really fun to watch. And Arnold Vosloo plays the mummy in this movie, and he is great to watch. He just made this role really an iconic role. I think Universal Studios still uses clips from the mummy on like their little, demo reels to this day when you buy like a new Blu-ray from them, because the movie was that popular and made that much of an impression. I think Arnold Vosloo's mummy is a reason that it did that, because he brings the role to life so well and is just such a great villain for the film. And last but not least, you just have the locations and sets and costumes for this film, which all feel like they're right out of classic Universal Hollywood. So perfectly matched to everything, and you feel like you're right in that time period that probably never really existed, but you really wish had, like that idealized, glorified 1920s, early 1900s feel, where, everyone was exploring all the corners of the earth, and Africa was spelled with a K on maps and things like that, and it was just that time period where things were unknown and explorable, and everyone was in that big adventure kind of spirit. And that's again what I think this movie does really well, is blending this very classic, idealistic early Hollywood image of the early 1900s and exploration and things like that, with sort of a more modern self-awareness and humor without going too overboard in either way, and finds this perfect middle ground where it's really just an enjoyable, all-around fun movie. So obviously I really enjoy this movie, and yes, I'm a little biased because I have always been obsessed with ancient Egypt and things like that, but I think it really is fun if you're a person who appreciates movies like Indiana Jones and other classic adventure movies, or movies inspired by classic adventure movies. This is definitely one worth checking out. As far as actual objective, like Oscar level quality of this movie goes, probably like a 6.5 or 7 out of 10. But if you're talking about just a fun ride of a movie that'll make you feel like a kid again, it's at least a 9.5 out of 10. Absolutely a fun ride, great movie to just sit down and watch and have a good time watching. Alright, thank you for watching this episode of Worth Watching Wednesdays. If you liked the video, like it, comment down below on what you thought of the Oscar nominations, and what you'd like to hear me review / recommend next week, and subscribe if you want to see more. Bye.